I found my wife's messages that completely destroyed my world. You think you know someone, your partner, your best friend, the person you've spent years building a life with. You think your relationship is built on trust, and nothing could ever shake that foundation. Well, that's what I thought too. Until one evening, when a single moment, one accidental discovery, shattered everything. I found my wife's messages, and that was the moment my world came crashing down. I don't even know how to begin this story, but I guess it's important to say that up until that point, everything seemed perfect. I had the kind of marriage that people envied. At least, that's what I thought. I married Kelly 6 years ago. We met in college and hit it off instantly. Shared interests, similar goals, the same sense of humor. It was one of those love stories that just made sense. We dated for a few years, moved in together, got married, and settled into a life I thought was stable and happy. Kelly was everything I wanted. Beautiful, intelligent, kind. She was my best friend. We didn't have any major issues. No fights that lasted more than a day. No secrets that felt too big to share. We built a home together, traveled, and always seemed to be on the same page. I honestly thought we were invincible. But then everything changed. It all started innocently enough. I was sitting on the couch one evening after work, just minding my own business when my phone buzzed. It wasn't a message from Kelly. It was from one of my friends. Just a typical text, a funny meme, something to break up the monotony of the evening. I didn't even think much of it. But then, out of habit, I reached for Kelly's phone. She had left it on the kitchen counter while she took a shower. I wasn't snooping. At least, I didn't think I was. I just checked to see if she had any messages from work or family. She had a busy day at the office, so it wasn't unusual for her to get a lot of texts. But this time, something caught my eye. A message from an unknown number. The message was simple, just a few words. I miss you. I can't wait to see you again. I'll admit, I froze. It wasn't the message itself that got to me. It was the fact that I didn't recognize the number. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was probably just some old acquaintance from work or someone she knew casually. But I couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the back of my mind. I told myself I was overreacting. I wasn't the jealous type. I trusted Kelly completely. But the thought lingered in my mind all evening. And when she came back downstairs, smiling and laughing as usual, I tried to push the feeling aside. The next few days went by in a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about that message, but I tried not to let it consume me. Then, the next evening, Kelly left her phone on the counter again while she went to grab something from the car. This time, I didn't hesitate. I picked up her phone. I told myself I wasn't snooping. I was just looking for any indication of what that message meant. And then I found it. A series of messages between Kelly and that same unknown number. They started off innocently enough, just casual conversation about work, how her day had gone, things like that. But as I scrolled up, I felt my heart begin to pound. The messages became more flirtatious, more intimate. One message, in particular, made my stomach twist. I can't stop thinking about you. The way you looked the other night. It drives me crazy. And then another. I miss being with you. I want to feel you again. My mind raced. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Kelly had been having an affair. A secret relationship with someone I didn't even know. Someone she had been hiding from me. Someone who had become more than just a casual acquaintance. My wife, the woman I trusted completely, was betraying me right under my nose. I was paralyzed. I didn't know what to do. Should I confront her? Should I ask her about it? Or should I wait and see if I could find out more? I was flooded with emotions. Anger, confusion, disbelief. How could she do this to me? I decided to confront her. I couldn't live with the knowledge of this secret hanging over me. I needed answers. I waited for her to come home. When she walked through the door, everything felt wrong. She was smiling, asking me about my day, as if nothing was different. But I could see it in her eyes. There was something she wasn't telling me, and I couldn't hold it in any longer. I showed her the phone, the messages, everything. I couldn't even speak at first, just handed it to her and waited. She didn't react at first. She just stared at the screen, her face going pale. Then she dropped her shoulders like she knew the moment had come. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sorry," I repeated. "Sorry for what?" "For cheating on me with someone else." "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, looking away. "It started innocently. We were just talking at first. But then, things got out of hand. I didn't want to hurt you." I was shaking. "You didn't hurt me. You've been lying to me, sneaking around behind my back. How long, Kelly? How long has this been going on?" She didn't answer right away. The silence between us felt suffocating. Finally, she whispered, "A few months. A few months." That was it. My entire world had been alive for months, and I had no idea. The trust one had built with her, the life we had shared, it was all shattered in an instant. I didn't know what to say next. I didn't know how to process the fact that the woman I loved had betrayed me in such a deeply personal way. All I could do was stare at her, feeling like everything I had built up had crumbled beneath me. I left the house that night. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay there. The pain was too much. My thoughts were a blur. I drove for hours, just needing to get away, needing to clear my mind. But no matter how far I drove, no matter how hard I tried to distract myself, the truth kept coming back to me. She had been seeing someone else. She had been lying to me, sneaking around, betraying the vows we had made to each other. And the worst part was that I couldn't even blame the other guy. He didn't owe me anything. It was her. She was the one who had broken the trust we'd built. The next few days were a haze. I didn't know what to do. Should I leave? Should I stay? Could I ever forgive her? Or was this the end of our marriage? When I finally went back to the house, I couldn't even look at her. We barely spoke for days. The damage had been done, and I knew I couldn't fix it. The trust was gone. The love had been tainted. I told her to move out. I needed space to think. And honestly, I needed to figure out who I was without her. I didn't recognize myself anymore. I didn't recognize the life I had spent so many years building. Months passed, and slowly, things began to get easier. It wasn't a quick fix. The pain didn't go away overnight. But eventually, I started focusing on myself again. I spent time with friends, rediscovered old hobbies, and even started going back to the gym. I was learning to live for myself, to rebuild my life from the pieces that had once been shattered. And as for Kelly, she reached out a few times, begging for forgiveness, asking if we could try again. But I couldn't go back. I couldn't forget what she had done, and I couldn't keep holding on to someone who had lied to me in such a devastating way. In the end, I realized something important. The most important relationship I had was the one with myself. I had to learn to trust myself again before I could trust anyone else. And that's exactly what I did. Kelly and I are no longer together, and I'm okay with that. I'm finally at peace. And though I'll never forget the pain she caused, I'm no longer defined by it. Months had passed since everything came to light, and while it felt like the storm inside of me had calmed, I still couldn't shake the feeling that I had been robbed of something irreplaceable. A part of me wanted to blame Jessica. And sure, she deserved a portion of the blame for the pain she caused, but it was deeper than that. I had been blindsided by my own naivety, and now I had to face the consequences of trusting someone with everything I had. The hardest part of all of this wasn't necessarily Jessica's betrayal. It was the aftermath, the silence, the uncertainty. Every little thing around me seemed to trigger memories of the life I thought I had. I would drive past our old favorite restaurants, and for a moment, I'd catch myself daydreaming about how we used to walk there together on weekends, laughing about something silly. But that life was gone. It was no longer mine, and I had to accept that. As I worked on moving forward, I realized that no amount of time or distance could ever take away the fact that I had been so blind to the truth for so long. The lies were like an infection that had slowly spread through every corner of our marriage, and I couldn't unsee it. I decided to take a trip to clear my head. I'd always wanted to visit the Grand Canyon, something Jessica and I had talked about doing together, but now it felt like the perfect opportunity for me to reclaim something for myself. I packed my bags, got in the car, and started the long drive to Arizona. The solitude of the open road gave me the space I needed to think. I spent hours just driving, letting my thoughts flow freely. As I passed through small towns and open fields, I realized how much of my life I'd put on hold for others. How much of me had been wrapped up in someone else's story. I had been living to please, living to make others happy, and I had lost myself along the way. The Grand Canyon was everything I thought it would be, and more. The vastness, the silence, the beauty of it all. As I stood at the edge, looking out over the endless landscape, I felt small, insignificant. But in a way, it was liberating. The world was so much bigger than the heartbreak I had experienced. My life was a tiny speck in the grand scheme of things, but I was beginning to understand that I still had time to make it count. I spent the next few days hiking, camping, and just reflecting. I didn't think about Jessica or Todd. I didn't even think about what had happened. It was just me and the vastness of the world around me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was reclaiming a part of myself I had lost. When I came back, I knew I had changed. I wasn't the same person who left, and I wasn't the same person who had walked out of that house months ago. I had grown stronger. I had come to terms with the fact that I couldn't change the past, but I could still shape my future. It was during this time that I started focusing on the things that brought me joy, things that had been pushed aside for far too long. I reconnected with old friends, people I had lost touch with over the years, and started making new memories. I joined a local hiking club, something I had always wanted to do, and found peace in the physical exertion in pushing my body to its limits. It was therapeutic, not just for my body, but for my mind as well. I also took up painting. It was something I had always wanted to try, but never had the time for. I found that expressing myself through art gave me a way to process everything I was feeling. I painted scenes of nature, of places I had visited, of things that reminded me that there was still beauty in the world, even after everything I had been through. But the most important step in all of this was learning to forgive myself. It's easy to blame others, to point fingers, but I had to learn to forgive myself for staying in a relationship that no longer served me. I had been so invested in our life together that I ignored the signs. I had allowed myself to be blinded by love, to ignore the cracks that had formed in our marriage long before the affair. And that wasn't Jessica's fault. It was mine too. Learning to forgive myself was the hardest part of all. I had to let go of the guilt, the self-blame. I had to remind myself that it wasn't a weakness to walk away from a broken situation. It was strength. I had done what was best for me, even if it was painful. And for the first time in months, I began to feel at peace with that decision. It's been over a year since everything came to light, and while I will never forget the pain Jessica's betrayal caused, I am no longer defined by it. I've built a new life, one that is entirely mine. I've learned that sometimes the most important relationship you can have is the one with yourself. I don't need anyone else's approval or validation. I am enough just as I am. As for Jessica, she reached out a few times, asking if we could meet and talk, but it never responded. I don't need closure from her. I don't need to hear her apologies. The truth is, I've already forgiven her. For me, not for her. I've let go of the past, and I no longer carry that weight with me. I don't know where life will take me next. I'm still open to love, to new experiences, but I'm not rushing into anything. I'm taking my time, letting things unfold as they will. For now, I'm just focusing on living in the present and embracing the peace I've found in my own company. As time went on, I continued to carve out a new life for myself. It was like starting from scratch, but there was something deeply satisfying about that. For so long, I had let my relationship with Jessica define me. I had let it shape my identity, dictate my choices, and I had sacrificed parts of myself in the process. But now I was slowly rebuilding, piece by piece, and each step forward felt like a small victory. Still, I wasn't immune to the occasional wave of doubt or loneliness. There were nights when I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what it would have been like if things had turned out differently. Would Jessica and I still be together if I had seen the signs earlier? Or was our relationship destined to fall apart? No matter how hard I tried to hold on to it, I'd be lying if I said those thoughts didn't creep in. It wasn't easy, and it still hurt sometimes to think about the good moments we had, the life we built. But those memories no longer held the same weight. They were no longer a source of pain. Instead, they were simply memories of a chapter that had closed. And I was learning to be okay with that. I had moments of weakness, sure. There were times when I missed the companionship, the intimacy, the connection that had once been so strong between us. But those moments were fleeting. They passed. And with each passing day, I found myself more focused on the person I was becoming rather than the person I had been. Around 6 months after everything unfolded, I found myself in a position I never thought I'd be in. I was finally starting to feel whole again. The pain wasn't gone, but it wasn't the first thing I woke up to every day anymore. It didn't dominate my thoughts, and it certainly didn't define my actions. I still spent time with friends, traveled more, and allowed myself to enjoy the simple things. I went to the movies by myself, tried new restaurants, and even picked up old hobbies that had been buried under the weight of my marriage. I was reconnecting with parts of myself I had forgotten about. But the real change came when I met someone new. Her name was Sarah. We met through a mutual friend, and our first encounter was completely unremarkable. I wasn't looking for anything serious. Heck, I wasn't sure if I was even ready to date again. But Sarah was different. There was an ease to being around her, an authenticity that I hadn't realized I was missing. We started talking more often, getting to know each other, and before I knew it, I was looking forward to our conversations. She was patient with me. She never pushed for anything more than I was willing to give. And I appreciated that more than she probably knew. With her, I didn't feel pressure to rush. I didn't feel like I had to put on a front or pretend I had all my shit together. I could just be myself. I wasn't sure if I was ready for a serious relationship, but Sarah made it easy. She didn't talk about the past, mine or hers. She wasn't trying to erase anything or replace anything. She was simply present, and that was something I hadn't realized I was missing until I had it again. We started spending more time together, doing simple things, grabbing coffee, taking long walks, visiting local markets. We never talked about my past with Jessica. I didn't need to explain. Sarah knew that everyone comes with their own story, and she respected mine. But then, one evening, I found myself standing at a crossroads. I had come to a point where I was happy, but I also didn't want to let myself fall into another relationship without confronting the past. I realized I had been carrying a lot of emotional baggage, and if I was going to move forward, I needed to address it. I needed to make sure I was emotionally available for the future, not just physically present. I went back to therapy, continuing the work I had started after everything fell apart with Jessica. It wasn't just about processing the pain anymore. It was about understanding myself, about building a life that was no longer shaped by someone else's choices. I had to learn to trust again, not just others, but myself. And then, one day, while I was sitting in my therapist's office, I had a realization. I wasn't scared anymore. Not of being alone, not of loving again, and definitely not of facing the past. I had faced it, I had survived it, and I had emerged from it stronger. That day, I felt like I was finally ready to open myself up to something new. The following months with Sarah felt different from anything I had experienced before. It wasn't a whirlwind romance. It wasn't fast. It wasn't perfect, but it felt real. She didn't ask for too much, and she didn't try to fix me. She simply loved me for who I was, and that was something I had learned to give back. We eventually became a couple, but it wasn't out of a need to replace the past. It was because I had learned to embrace my present, to be content with who I had become. Sarah was part of that, but she didn't define it. I never told her everything about Jessica and Todd, and she never asked. I didn't need to burden her with that. What mattered was that I had healed, I had moved forward, and I was now in a relationship where I felt respected and loved for who I was, flaws and all. And as for Jessica, well, I heard through a mutual friend that she and Todd were still together. It didn't affect me the way it once would have. In fact, I felt almost indifferent. I didn't need to know the details of their life anymore. I didn't need to keep track of their story. My life was mine to write now, and I was done letting anyone else control that narrative. The thing about healing is that it doesn't happen on anyone else's timeline. It doesn't follow a neat, predictable path. Some days are better than others, and you'll fall back into old patterns before you catch yourself. But eventually, you start to understand that you're allowed to heal at your own pace. You're allowed to rebuild, to reclaim your happiness, and to move forward without needing anyone else's permission or apology. And that's exactly what I did.